We're finally on our way to Ladysmith Light Up, minus Irene and Bunny, who've disappeared. Jude is putting them in a painting. Don't ask. Traffic slowed to a crawl outside of Ladysmith, and Jude pulled into the left lane and inched her way forward to the traffic cop. And she rolled down the window and explained to him that we had to get up to handicap parking, and he let us through. Once we were in the town, traffic was light because so many streets had been blocked off for the parade. People were wandering around, scoping out the best places to watch the parade from, and some people had already put down their tarps on the curb, even though the parade was an hour and a half off. When we got to the parade route, a traffic warden walked in front of our bus, clearing the way all the way to the handicap parking. Now, it wasn't where I thought it was going to be from the map. It was excellent for watching the parade, and it wasn't bad for the spaghetti dinner because it was only a block away from the Eagle Hall, but it was 4 blocks away from the Agricultural Hall, which wasn't really good for keeping an eye out for Bryce. "Penny pinchers, we need a strategy," said Frida. "Well, we're so close to the parade route we could watch from the bus," said Mary Lou. "No way," said Frida. "I love parades. I want to be right down on the curb." "I'm afraid I agree with her," said Frankie. "I want to be right out front." "Oh, I forgot you cry at parades," said Mary Lou. Frankie gave her sister a death stare. "We get out all the chairs and we line them up on the curb," said May, "and we leave room in the middle for Frida." "That's a good idea," said Frankie, "because that way half of us can go to the spaghetti dinner while the other half watches the chairs, and then we can switch." "I'll sit with the chairs first," said Frida, "because nobody will ask me to move. And if I explain that the other chairs are for my friends, they'll leave them." So it was settled. Jude found a space at the curb where there was enough room for her wheelchair and for people to pass behind it, and we set up the chairs on either side of her. It had stopped raining, so we didn't have to worry about keeping the empty chairs dry. Jude and I decided to split up so that one of us would always be with the bus in case we had to move it or something weird happened. Frankie, Mary Lou, and Jude went off to the Eagle Hall for spaghetti. Raven and I settled in the 2 chairs at the end of the rows, and May sat next to Frida. 4 teenagers came up, put down a tarp next to me, and sat all the way down on the curb with ease. I used to do that. May had her knitting out, and both her hands and her mouth were busy as she talked to Frida, who was drinking in the sights and sounds with obvious delight. Wayne, our guy from the garage, came out of the crowd and squatted next to Raven. "Hey, I used to do that too." Then I thought, get over yourself, and I waved at Wayne and he waved back. I mean, you can't hold it against a guy because he can squat. I looked up the street. The recent rain had created a mist or a soft fog so that the people and buildings near me were clear, but as my eye traveled up the street, they softened and blurred. Overhead you could see the evergreen boughs and the Christmas lights, all dark as yet. At the end of the tree there was a humongous evergreen tree hovering on the edge of the fog like a mysterious ghost. The low-lying clouds had dampened the noise of the crowd, but the rain had forced them to choose all color of rain gear. There were bright yellow slickers and every hue of Gore-Tex, the soft colors of Cowichan sweaters, all clamored for attention in the soft scene. I started to get excited. This is going to be fun. By the time it was our turn to go to dinner, the crowd had grown up around us, but they all backed up to let Frida out so she could motor down the sidewalk, and we all fell in line behind her as the best way to get to the Eagle Hall. The line outside the Eagle Hall wasn't very long, and it seemed to be moving fairly quickly. So I just kind of stood in the line and tried not to think about how hungry I was, when suddenly May elbows me in the side. "There's that guy," she said. "What guy?" "The guy from the hotel. I told you he was following us." I followed May's intense stare. I searched among the faces of the adults until at last my eye settled on a man standing in a recessed doorway of a closed shop. Just as I registered that he was indeed the guy from the hotel who hadn't eaten breakfast, 2 other guys squeezed into the entryway with him. And they spoke to him and he smiled, but I kind of guessed that if I had to put money on it, I'd say he was nervous, not welcoming. The 3 continued talking. It was clear they knew each other. I was wary of them, but I couldn't figure out why. I mean, all around me, hundreds of people were meeting each other. They were all strangers, and they were all talking to each other. And then I realized, even though there was a wide variety in the clothing, nobody was dressed like these 2 guys. I mean, who wears leather to a parade in the rain? One guy had on a leather car coat that looked like it cost a bomb. His gloves and his shoes matched, and his brown slacks had a knife edge. The other guy was all in black. He had a black leather jacket, black jeans, black boots with silver chains over the instep. I bet if he took off his jacket, he'd have a black t-shirt and tattoos. "I'm going to see what they're talking about," said May. Before I could stop her, she started pulling across the street. I panicked. Then I thought, they're not going to pay any attention to her. She's a 5-foot woman in gumboots, fleece sweatpants, and 3 sweaters under a see-through plastic raincoat topped off with a Santa hat. She doesn't look like a spy. I thought about going with her, but then I thought it would just call more attention to her. So I kind of hung out in front of the Eagle Claw and tried to pretend I wasn't keeping an eye on her. The line lurched ahead, and I heard the volunteer tell Frida that she and her friends could go in and they would find a place for us to sit down. I leaned over and I said to Raven, "You go in ahead of me. I'll wait for May." "What's she doing over there?" said Frida. "I'll tell you later." So Frida and Raven went into the Eagles Hall, and I attached myself to a group that was standing outside. May had managed to find an opening between 2 kids, and she had positioned herself behind the guy in black so that the guy from the hotel couldn't see her, but she was close enough to eavesdrop. I tried to remember if she was hard of hearing. A man and a woman with 4 little kids, kind of 3 to 10 years old, moved into the space in front of May and started setting up on the curb. All I could see of May was the top of her Santa hat. Then the man turned and talked to me, and then the woman turned and talked to me and pointed to a lawn chair. I could see May shaking her head and bowing. The guys in the entryways looked over to see what the commotion was all about. Oh no, I thought this could not be good. May pointed down the street and started pulling back across the road. She entered our side of the street about halfway between our campsite and me. And she hugged somebody like a long-lost friend. I'd never seen them before. And then she started pulling toward me. And when she saw that the guys were no longer in the doorway, she hurried over to me and she said, "Quick, go inside." So I told the volunteers that we were with a woman in the wheelchair, and she let us in. "What happened over there?" I said. "Oh, everything was fine," said May, "until this family came along, and then they decided that I should sit in front of them so that I could see the parade, and I couldn't tell them that I wasn't there to see the parade. I was spying. So I just told them that I saw a friend across the street and left, but not before I heard something very interesting." "What?" I said. "I heard the guy from the hotel tell the other guys that it was going to be at the craft fair at 8:30 and he could pick it up then." This sent shivers down my spine because it was chillingly like the note that Bryce had left for Mary Lou that May didn't know anything about. Could they be related? Oh boy, this could get seriously ugly. I thought briefly of letting Jude know, but then I could hear her in my head saying what a worrywart I was. This from a woman who searched our entire bus for smuggled drugs. She is so annoying. Frida saw us in line and motioned us over to her table. I was hungry. So I wanted to eat, and we had time, so we went through the line and we loaded up on spaghetti and garlic bread and took it over to the table with Frida and Raven. Then we filled them in on what May had found out. I didn't mention anything about Bryce because I felt like it was Mary Lou's decision how much she wanted the other people to know about her great-grandson. It would be interesting to know, said Frida, if the man over there is the same man who left the bag in the storage room the night it was broken into. We all agreed that if anybody saw him, they should take out their cell phones and pretend to take a picture of the parade and get him in it, and we could show it to Carolyn. When we made our way back to the curb campsite, I motioned for everybody to gather around Frida. Jude gave me a, "What now, look?" and I just grimaced at her. When we were all together, we must look like an old lady football huddle. I filled everybody in on what May had found out. "I'm quite concerned that these men might have some connection to Bryce," said Frankie. "Well, it may be just a coincidence," said Mary Lou, "but what if it isn't?" "We need a plan," said Frida. "Oh dear," said Mary Lou. "I hate for you to get involved in something that Bryce has dragged us into that could be dangerous." "I agree," said Frankie. "Perhaps when we go to meet him, Mavis and Jude could come with us." "No way," said May. "We all go together, strength in numbers." "I agree," said Frida. "We all go." I agree," said Frida. "We all go, and if it turns out to be nothing, we can all feel like silly old ladies together." Thankfully, Jude kept her mouth shut, and so did I. I had no way of figuring out how Jude and I could possibly protect Bryce, Mary Lou, and Frankie. And really, I had no idea how the whole group could protect them. It just felt safer. "Getting back to the plan, ladies," said Frida. "Raven, after the parade, would you go with Mary Lou and Frankie and watch for Bryce and make sure he stays with them?" "I can do that," said Raven. "The rest of us should spread out and look for those guys," said May. "Just a minute," said Frankie. "There's thousands of people here. If we spread out, we might not be able to find each other." "We can use our cell phones," said May. "Oh, there's so much commotion going around, I don't know that we would hear them," said Mary Lou. There was a general nod of agreement, and which I was really glad about, because I didn't fancy having to stick with Jude. I don't have a cell phone. "Okay, we'll stick together," said Frida. "So what if we see him?" I said. "I'll go up to him and I'll ask him if he's the man who left the bag in the Ocean View Hotel in Cowichan Bay," said Jude. "Well, what if the leather guys are with him?" said Frankie. "Well, then we'll just tail him," I said. Jude nodded, but I wasn't so sure we could count on her to back off if the three of them were together. Once we made the plan, we all sat down in our chairs. Most of the penny pinchers pulled out their cell phones and started to take pictures. Jude was taking pictures too with her cell phone. I wondered if I could talk her into getting some real pictures for me, I thought. A siren started at the top of the street, and everyone moved into the street to see the start of the parade. We were all looking at the crowd, looking for those guys from the doorway. If anybody had been watching us, we would have looked totally suspicious. Then the flags and the band got to our street, and we all backed up to the curb and got caught up in the excitement. It's hard to stay focused on creepy guys when bands are playing Christmas carols, Santa is throwing candy from his sleigh, and a host of industrial vehicles, fire truck, tractors, backhoe, cement truck, flatbed, all festooned with lights, move slowly by us, carrying the local royalty and dozens of happy kids. My favorite was the cement truck. I think if they'd had a school bus, I would have cried. Mary Lou was right. Frankie started to cry the minute she heard the bagpipes. I asked her to take a picture for me of the horses. She said she already had. She had a picture of every unit. When Santa reached the big tree, he flipped a switch and all the lights went on. The evergreens strung across the parade route had Twinkie lights in them. Our whole street glowed. I was surprised to see the multicolored lights going up the humongous evergreen, that they marched in totally straight lines. There must have been some really tidy person on the decoration committee. The star at the top looked to be about the size of a large screen TV. As the parade passed, the spectators moved into the street and followed the parade to the big tree. After all, there was still a fireworks display to come. We gathered up our bag chairs and stowed them in the bus and followed the crowd. The craft fair was in the agricultural hall, which was right next to the big tree. I kept scanning the crowd for the guy from the hotel or the leather guys, but I came up empty. I didn't see Bryce either, but I'm not 100% sure that I would recognize him. When we got down to the end of the street, the crowd was thicker. They were all standing around waiting for the fireworks to start. We all lined up behind Frida's chair, and she motored through the crowd saying, "Excuse me, excuse me, excuse me," until we got to the entrance to the agricultural hall. Then Raven went in with Frankie and Mary Lou to look for Bryce, and we all scanned the crowd looking for those guys. I stuck my head in the hall to see what was going on. There must have been a mistake in our itinerary. The craft fair was over. People were taking down their decorations and packing up their booze. The twins and Raven walked around the hall looking hopeful. When they got up near the stage, Bryce walked out from a side door and approached them. Mary Lou stepped forward and hugged him. He stepped back. He spoke, she spoke. His mouth fell open. "He doesn't look happy," said May. "He's finding out that the old can be just as unreliable as the young," I said. "So that's the guy from the hotel," said Jude. I followed her gaze and saw the hotel guy making his way up the steps. "Yep." "Now we see if they go to the same meeting," said May. "I got this," said Jude. She stepped forward into the path of the guy and said, "Pardon me, sir, did you leave an overnight bag in storage at the Ocean View Hotel in Cowichan Bay?" "What?" He halted momentarily, focused on Jude for a nanosecond, and sidestepped her. "I gotta see somebody," he said, and he started across the hall toward Bryce. Bryce's facial muscles went from shock to horror. He wheeled around to bolt, but Raven had moved in and cut off his exit. Mary Lou and Frankie had followed his stare, noted the hotel guy and Bryce's reaction, and moved as one. Frankie hooked her arm around one of Bryce's. Mary Lou hooked her arm around the other. Raven stayed on his back like a jacket. They wheeled him around and marched him across the floor right past the hotel guy. The twins, chins up, stared straight ahead and never faltered. Bryce looked wildly at the hotel guy but kept moving. Hotel guy kind of glanced around the room and took in the people walking around and taking down their booze, and he kind of sauntered toward the front of the hall. May whipped out her cell phone and took a picture of him. "I bet he's the one," she said. "Wait till I show Carolyn." By the time they had reached us, Frida had opened a path in the crowd. I waited for the four of them to follow Frida, and then I fell in behind them. I made sure I was the last in line, checking to see if the hotel guy was following us. We marched steadily through the crowd as the fireworks started. Everyone was facing the big tree and oohing and awing as burst after burst of color exploded in the sky and went all shimmery in the lifting fog. When we were a block away, I turned around to see if I could see the hotel guy. I saw him come out of the ag hall and stop on the steps. The leather guys walked up the steps and talked to the hotel guy. Then the city slicker guy looked around at the crowd, then nodded at the black leather guy, and the black leather guy moved in close and hit the hotel guy right in the gut. The hotel guy doubled over with one hand across his stomach, and with the other one he pointed at us. The city slicker followed his arm. His eyes met mine. He looked in my eyes. I looked in his. His stare gave me the willies. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I turned back and caught up with the others, who were resolutely marching with their backs to the fireworks all the way to the bus. The penny pinchers obviously shared my idea that it was time to get out of town. I did look back to see if any of the guys were following us, but I couldn't see any of them. It was not reassuring. Clearly, we had to get the hell out of Dodge before we could begin to unravel what was happening. Jude started the engine. I lowered the lift. We all got on. Raven strapped down Frida's wheelchair. Frankie pushed Bryce into the chair next to Mary Lou, and we headed for the Trans-Canada Highway. The bus was silent as we navigated through town and got on the highway. Fortunately, most of the crowd was still watching the fireworks, so we were ahead of the traffic. As we headed south and Jude hit her cruising speed, the interior of the bus was enveloped in the shadowy light created by the glare of headlights on wet pavement. The hum of the engine and the back and forth of the windshield wipers would have been hypnotic if it weren't for the tension. Mary Lou spoke into the half-life. Bryce, what in the name of all that's holy is going on? Bryce slouched in his seat with his hands in his pocket and his hood up. Everything would have been fine if you just brought Kaylee's gift like I asked you, he said. What everything, Frankie asked. I could have just given it to Chris right then and there and it would be over. Who's Chris? Asked Mary Lou. That guy who showed up at the hall. Thanks a lot for telling him I was gonna be there. Bryce, neither of us have ever spoken to that man, said Mary Lou. Well, like I didn't tell anybody but you and the guys I met in the pub. What guys in the pub? Well, I met them in the pub and they're going to Victoria and they told me they would give me a lift because they're going after Light Up. And that's why I wanted you to bring the music box so I could take it to Kaylee. Music box? The present, duh. Bryce, sit up. Take your hands out of your pockets. Take your hood down. I think it's time you start at the beginning and tell us the whole story. Frankie spoke with the full weight of her years of high school teaching behind her. Bryce sat up and took his hands out of his pockets. I would have too. I think everybody on the bus improved their posture. Okay, look. I got the music box from Chris because I didn't think he wanted it, and I was gonna give it to Kaylee because it's covered in white roses and they're her thing. Okay? Okay, said Mary Lou. Then what? Well, then I gave it to you to give to Kaylee, and then Chris throws this big Harry and wants it back. So I go to your house and you're gone, so now what? So I go home, and Mom's got your schedule up on the fridge, so I look at it, and then Tom's telling me I'm in some serious shit and I gotta get that box back. So I follow you. Who's Tom? Frankie asked. Well, he's a friend who knows Chris. Did you ask for me at the reception in Nanaimo? Asked Mary Lou. Yeah. Well, why didn't you come into the dining room? Well, I was gonna, and then I saw Chris go across the parking lot and go in, and there was no way I wanted to run into him until I had the box back, so I split. Well, did you try to get into the bus in Cowichan Bay? Asked Frankie. Well, yeah, but not after Chris screwed my chance to get the box in Nanaimo, but I couldn't open the door. I mean, listening to this kid was like hearing tumblers fall into place. I looked over at Jude. Her eyes were on the road, but she was following the conversation, and she was painting away in her mind. You say you got the music box from this man, Chris. Did you buy it? Mary Lou asked. No, we got it for Chris, but he didn't want it, so he got mad, so I thought, fine, I'll take it. Then he goes all hairy and wants it back. Where did you get it? Frankie asked. Bryce kind of shifted in his seat and said, from Tom, this guy I know. Mary Lou and Frankie let the silence go on for several beats before Mary Lou finally said, if I understand you correctly, Tom gave you a music box, which you gave to Chris, who didn't want it, so you gave it to me to give to Kaylee. Yeah. Well, it would seem that a simple conversation with Chris could clear up this whole matter, said Frankie. Well, that's why I needed the box. If I give him the box, maybe he'll chill and get off my case. Tonight when we go back to the hotel, I'll get the music box from the storage, and Frankie and I will go with you to give it to Chris, Mary Lou said. I think we should all go when he gives it to Chris, said Frida. There was a general murmur of agreement. Clearly, everyone in the bus had been a silent participant in the conversation. Furthermore, I could sense the unspoken agreement that Bryce's story had holes in it you could drive a school bus through. Whatever, said Bryce. Everyone fell silent after that. They must be exhausted. I know I was. And also, I was panic-stricken out of my mind. I kept seeing the city slicker staring at me, staring at him. It was a I know and I know you know I know moment. But what the hell did I know? I tried to think. Okay, I saw the leather guys punch out Chris, and they saw me seeing them. That could not be good. But what did it mean? I mean, was Chris with the leather guys or against the leather guys? And were they all looking for the music box or only Chris? Did the leather guys beating up Chris have anything to do with us? Probably yes, judging from the city slicker's chilling stare. What if they were with him when we went to take the music box back? And why all this commotion over a music box anyway? I mean, frankly, none of these guys looked like they would give a damn about a music box. None of it made any sense. I just knew Bryce had put his foot in some deep doo-doo and we were following in his footsteps. And I was the only one who had seen the leather guys punch Chris. I needed to talk to somebody so I could hear myself think. Also, I have to tell Jude because we're both responsible for the safety of our passengers. But this goes way past making sure there's air in the tires. I was half afraid to tell Jude because I was afraid she would just call me a worrywart. And I was half afraid to tell her because I thought she might get all riled up and go off and do something that would put us all in danger. And I didn't want to talk to Frankie because I was pretty sure she'd want us to go to the cops. And I could just hear them. You were assaulted by a look? I didn't want to talk on the bus because I didn't want anybody to overhear me and worry. I mean, I could worry enough for all of us. I could hear my mother's voice as clear as if she was sitting next to me. All right, stew in your own juice. Cripes, when was the last time you heard that one?